What's up, guys? My name is Zach, and today I am driving a 2022 Volkswagen Golf GTI. Up front is a 2.0 liter turbocharged inline 4, and down below is a 6-speed manual transmission. Now, I am super excited to be driving this here GTI for a couple of reasons, but mainly the fact that it is a Mark 8 GTI, meaning it is the 8th generation of Volkswagen GTI, which was unveiled for the 2022 model year, which this is. And according to the owner, this is the first Mark 8 GTI to be delivered here in Illinois. So it's always kind of exciting to be on the cutting edge. The second reason I'm excited to be driving this here Golf GTI is because it is manual, which is actually the least popular option, and I'm excited to be shifting my own gears today. Before we get back to the car, if you guys would like to help out the channel, I do have a website, zachpradel.com, found in the description below for merchandise. I have a blog where I update you guys on what cars I'm filming and excited about, and you can also submit your vehicle there, as well as at pradelreviews@gmail.com. All that stuff will be left in the description below. But let's get back to that 2.0 liter turbocharged inline 4 under the hood. Well, it makes 241 horsepower and 273 foot-pounds of torque, which is 13 more horsepower than the previous gen and 15 more foot-pounds of torque than the previous gen. However, it's pretty much the same setup as you would get in a Mark 7 GTI. The powertrain hasn't really changed. This particular car is the Autobahn trim level, meaning it has dynamic chassis control, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But power-wise, it's very much still a GTI, and that is the redeeming quality of this car. It drives and feels and operates like the GTI you've come to know and love for the past 5 decades. Volkswagen doesn't really miss the mark when it comes to the GTI. And that's a good thing, but that's also an interesting point that we'll talk about towards the end. But like I said, paired to it is a 6-speed manual transmission. Now, that's kind of an important part of this car. If you want the automatic DSG, dual clutch transmission, you have to pay out an extra $800. That's not really the interesting part. The interesting part is the fact that the DSG automatic is kind of the preferred transmission nowadays when it comes to the GTI. Volkswagen has nearly perfected the DSG transmission. It's a fantastic transmission. It's tons and tons of fun to drive. It shifts lightning quick. It's responsive. It's enjoyable. And when it comes to automatic transmissions, really, in my opinion, in vehicles like this, it's hard to find anything better. And so eventually, it only makes sense that Volkswagen will switch to only offering that transmission. It's more popular. But I like the fact that this here is a 6-speed. And what I like about the 6-speed is the fact that it doesn't feel numb. I've driven a 2012 Volkswagen GLI, which is basically the hopped-up GTI version of the Jetta. And that had such a numb clutch. It didn't feel like I was shifting gears at all. It felt like I was kicking my foot and then the computer said, okay, shift. This has a really good clutch feel. Nice clutch engagement. I actually feel like I'm doing something. And I feel very comfortable with it given the fact that I've only driven this car for, well, not that long. A superb manual transmission and probably one of the last. All right. Let's put it into sport. We'll come around the bend here and see what it'll do. Probably all wind noise there, I apologize. The GTI isn't a very loud car, but boy is it fun. And with the manual transmission, it's just up and down, shift, 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 click, click, click. It's a blast. Volkswagen knows what they're doing to make a fun car. Oh boy, do they know what they're doing. Let's take a corner here. Very good. Very good. Last but not least, the GTI is front-wheel drive, always have been, probably always will be, but it does get a limited slip front differential, which is fantastic. So let's talk about the interior. We have quite a bit to go through in here as well. In front of me, I have digital gauges. On the left is my fuel economy, and the center is my tachometer. Absolutely love that. It has speed on the inside, says GTI on it. And to the right, I have my average, MPG, and things like that. Now, if I switch modes here, if I put it in comfort mode, things turn red. I do have custom as well, and we'll talk about those custom settings a little bit later on. But I love this gauge cluster. I think this is an absolutely superb gauge cluster. It's bright, it's colorful, it's clean, it's clear, it's concise. It says GTI. It has this sort of hexagonal webbing that is found throughout the rest of the car. It's absolutely fabulous. Now for the gauges, you can swap out those economy gauges. I'll show a couple options here, blah, 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 filling time while you're looking at what you want to see, which is the gauge options. I love the fact that you get a bunch of gauge options here in the GTI. I think it's really helpful, and since it is a screen, you might as well, right? Up above the gauges, because this is the Autobahn, I do get a heads-up display giving me the speed limit of the road, as well as my current speed, and I have my radar cruise control settings, which we'll talk about here when we talk about the steering wheel. Speaking of which, the steering wheel is nice. It is heated. I have 3 different levels of heated steering wheel, which is a big deal. I feel like most other cars just have on or off when it comes to steering wheel heat, but I can actually adjust it here. On the left, this is where you'll find your cruise control settings. This car does have radar cruise control, which is fantastic for a manual transmission vehicle. I also have volume over here, and then on the right side, I have my view options. For the gauges, I can go through all of my menus, things like that, which I absolutely love. Now, the steering wheel is the first time we start to deal with these newfangled buttons coming out of Volkswagen, which they're not really clickable buttons, they're haptics. And on the steering wheel, I don't quite mind it. However, they are piano black, which might get a little grubby over time, but again, I'll talk about that more a little bit later on. The steering wheel itself feels nice. I have this perforated leather, GTI badge down at the bottom, and I think it's a really good size. To the left of me, I have my headlight switches. This is more haptic switches from Volkswagen, and this is where I start to not like them as much. The reason for that is that this car has around 500-ish miles on it, and these already look dirty. These piano black buttons or any piano black surface just collects fingerprints like it's going out of style. However, I complained a lot about them in the Volkswagen ID4 that I reviewed, and now using them here in the GTI, they do feel a little bit better. I'm a little bit more used to them. You can get used to them. There's a big learning curve, but it can be done. On the door, I have my traditional lock and unlock, power mirrors, and power windows. I love that these are all traditional switches. These are not piano black. Volkswagen actually kept these normal, and I appreciate that. Moving into the center, we do have the new Volkswagen infotainment system, so let's pull over and talk about it. All right, so let's talk Volkswagen infotainment. First of all, this is their new infotainment system. I've used this in the ID4 that I reviewed, and so a lot of it still applies. I have this nice touchscreen. It's fairly responsive. I seem to like it. I do have some ambient light controls I could do. I love the names of it. They're kind of extra, but infinity, eternity, desire, euphoria, vitality, and custom. So you can change that stuff there. I can also go to vehicle here. We have a nice little Volkswagen icon. Okay, that's one thing I want to point out. Hold on. Anytime you say Volkswagen, or I guess not that time. When you say Volkswagen, it thinks that you're, see? Okay, it thinks that you're talking to it, which was very annoying when I was filming the driving portion. I kept saying Volkswagen, and it was thinking that I was talking to it. I was not. But I have like headlight settings, and something cool is that I can kind of spin this car around if I would like. Speaking of which, we have our different drive modes, and I can go to custom here and customize it. And these are all the different things I can change about my drive mode. Climate is in comfort, light assist, ACC, engine sound, sport, so it does pipe in sound through the speakers, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what you think, and DCC, or dynamic chassis control. Here's the thing. It does have dynamic chassis control, and it'll change up the suspension dependent on mode, and you can change that here. Look at how many different flippin' settings there are. I drove it in comfort, I drove it in sport. I don't notice a huge difference. You definitely notice it a little bit, but honestly for daily driving, I would leave it in comfort. If I took this car to the tail of the dragon or out on the racetrack, of course I would bump it all the way up above sport. But for daily driving, you're not gonna really notice it. It's not like on your 9 to 5 commute, you toss it into sport dynamic chassis control, and you're gonna start carving your way through traffic. It's not going to be that big of a difference, but it's still cool that you can operate that. And when you do change drive modes, all of the buttons change color. So if we go here to sport, We come back to the home menu. Now everything is red, which is kind of cool. However, I do like the look of Eco better, which this might be the only Eco mode that actually goes to blue instead of green like in other cars. I do have Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. I can set up CarNet, things like that. Nothing else really too crazy as I bump the camera, trying to put my foot on the clutch to show you the reverse camera. Reverse camera is pretty high quality. When you turn the steering wheel, the lines move, which is fantastic. And I do have these parking sensors and parking assist as well. That's pretty much it for the infotainment system. I like it a lot better here in the GTI than I did in the ID4. I think I was just so annoyed with the ID4 that anything inside of it was bad. But I actually quite like it here. There are some learning curves, things you'd have to get used to, but not the end of the world. Down below that infotainment system, I have more piano black touchable switches. I'm not a huge fan of these, again, because they are piano black. I don't know why they couldn't have just been matte black. I feel like it actually would have fit better on the dash, just looks wise. However, something that the owner pointed out to me that I did not know, and I'm very appreciative of, is the fact that if you take both fingers and double tap the climate controls, it will actually change the heated seat controls. So it's a little bit of a shortcut there, because finding the heated seat controls is a multi-step process, but if you take both fingers and tap the temperature, you should be good to go. I do get dual zone climate here, which is also very nice. The passenger can choose their own temperature. Then we have a small cluster again of haptic buttons, which is for the driving assist, climate controls, menu, and mode. These are basically my hotkeys, if you want to think of it that way, which are very nice, a little bit to get used to, but I'm enjoying them. Moving down to the center console, I have two USB inputs, both USB-C, which is interesting to see cars starting to move that way. Then I have a wireless charger and the engine start-stop button. They've done this for generations and generations of the GTI. And then the shifter itself. The shifter looks nice and presentable. I really do enjoy the look of it. I think it's presented well, and like I said at the top of the video, it is very nice and comfortable to shift. Then I have a parking brake down at the very bottom. This is an electronic parking brake, which is fine. I normally don't like it on a manual car, but I think I'm getting too old to sort of fight that battle. But what I will fight is off to the right of that, I have a dead switch or little panel. Looks like it should be some type of button, but it's not, which is disheartening to see because this is the Autobahn. There shouldn't be a dead button. Then we do have cup holders, so we'll do a big friggin' bottle test here in the 2022 GTI, and it passes. Then we have a 12-volt outlet off to the right of the cup holders, and I get a little center console. Moving on to the seats are nice and comfortable. This is part of the Autobahn package. The fact that they are heated and ventilated, and they are nice and comfortable, and they are big man friendly, which is always nice for me to see. Speaking of seats, this is the 4-door. We do have back seats, so let's go do a back seat review. All right, so we're in the back of the 2022 Volkswagen Golf GTI. Not a whole lot to talk about back here. I do fit. My knees are barely hitting the seat in front of me. My headroom is good. It's a little bit of a tight, close, small space, but for any vehicle in this segment, it's going to be the same across the board, whether you look at the Subaru WRX, the Mazda 3 Turbo. Honestly, this is way better than the Mazda 3 Turbo. It's just kind of run-of-the-mill for vehicles like this. However, I do have cup holders back here, and I have my own climate controls, and the Autobahn gets rear heated seats. So that's an option that I will pleasantly enjoy today, as it is 30 degrees outside Fahrenheit, which is not great. Let's take a quick look at the trunk, and then we'll talk about the looks. All right, so we're on the back of the GTI, and just like in years past, to open it, you lift up on the Volkswagen logo, and here we are in the back. We have the roadside assistance kit and things of that nature. I do have a 12-volt outlet tucked up here. Don't get one on the other side, but I do have some tie downs, and I have this nice privacy cover. This makes the car very, very practical. You could fit tons and tons of stuff back here, which is great. And we can get under here, and we do have a spare tire as well, not just a can of Fix-A-Flat, which I absolutely love. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and this is one of the most obvious changes for the Mark 8 GTI, and I absolutely love the look of it. I think it's angular, I think it's modern, I think it's futuristic, and I think it's a very obvious successor to the Mark 7. You can tell it still has that same basic shape, the same basic styling cues, but done in a more modern way, and I love it. The only thing that I don't like about the exterior is the GTI badge on the back. I think it looks a little bit out of place, but not the end of the world. I do really love the hexagonal fog lights up at the front. All the hexagons in here really remind me, actually, of Volkswagen's other brand, Lamborghini. One thing also to mention about the exterior is the fact that this is on a winter setup. These are older Jetta wheels with BlizzX's on them. So here are some pictures of the car on the wheels that it normally comes on. Again, this is just a winter setup here in Chicago. You gotta have your BlizzX's for the winter. So it looks much better on the factory wheels. So enjoy them thoroughly. But now let's get to my final thoughts here on the Mark 8 GTI. Well, I love it. Plain and simple, I really love this car. For a daily driver, something you're gonna drive, rain or shine, day or night, it's hard to beat a GTI, and they've been that perfect sort of middle ground car for a long time. Volkswagen is very good at this. They know what they're doing. And the Mark 8 is no different. If you can only afford one car, you're into spirited driving, you like cars, you want something fun to drive, but it's also practical, bada bing, bada boom, here's the Mark 8 GTI, buy one. There are some little nuanced things in here that I don't really like, but that's just technology. It's a decision Volkswagen made. If I owned this car, I think I'd get over it in a day. The thing that people struggle to remember, or realize, I guess, is that I've read a couple articles, seen a couple headlines that are like, oh, this is nothing new. The GTI offers nothing new, nothing new. And at the end of the day, that's kind of true. This isn't that much different of an experience when it comes to driving than the Mark 7. However, it's hard to innovate and revolutionize something that's already so good as it is. The same argument could be made that in the last 100 years, the bouncy ball hasn't been updated or changed. And yet it's curious that you don't see kids running around complaining about how outdated their bouncy ball is. They're just happy to have a bouncy ball. For a quarter at Red Robin, you can have one. And you can play with it for hours. You can chuck it super hard at the ground and watch it bounce all over the place. You can piss off your parents. You can throw it at your neighbor. It's a blast. There's no need to update or change the bouncy ball. It's just a bouncy ball. And that's how I feel about the GTI. Yes, they can throw more technology into it to keep up with modern cars, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to go up and change it. Yeah, it doesn't offer that much new stuff because the old stuff was so good. And so when I hear that debate of, oh, the Mark 8 isn't that new, they just changed the looks on the Mark 7, good. I liked the Mark 7. I love the Mark 6. I love the Mark 5. I really enjoyed the Mark 4. I think with the radar cruise and the new infotainment and the digital gauge cluster, I think it's new enough to keep interest, but old enough to remain fun. And boy, is it fun. Always has been, and always will be. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Alex for letting me take out his Mark 8 GTI. He just got this car recently, so I appreciate him reaching out to me so soon and giving me the opportunity to drive one of these. I mean, these cars are just, they're spectacular. They really are, so huge thank you to him. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.